Welcome to the Core Confidence Life podcast for men. I am your host, Dennis, broadcasting right here in New York City. You are watching Core Confidence Life TV. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please do. It'll make me very happy. And as a bonus, you'll get to watch and be updated and alerted on the interviews and presentations we have in store for you. And also, you can follow us, me, Core Confidence Life, on social media. Go to Facebook, go to Twitter, Core Confidence Life, and of course, subscribe to our podcast over at iTunes and your favorite podcatchers. All right, on today's program, we're going to talk about one of the biggest disputes that exists in relationships today. All right, and that is money. That's finances. We don't normally talk a lot about finances here, but we are about making you into the best you possible, and part of that is communicating effectively. When you communicate effectively about your wants, needs, and desires in a relationship, everything goes that much better. Finances is no different. On today's program, we're going to be talking to Zach Prichard. He is a communication finance coach. So if you are married or you're in a long-term relationship and you're considering being married, what should your finances look like? Should you have a separate bank account? How do you work out being a spender versus someone who's a little bit more frugal? And those kinds of disputes, if gone unchecked and uncommunicated, can cause your relationship to break into many pieces. So communicating effectively with your partner about finances, Zach Prichard coming at you, all right? And we don't waste no time. We want to spend your time wisely after this. Core Confidence Life. Welcome to the program once again, and I am your host coming at you, and we are going to be talking to a financial coach about everything finance and communication. So, Zach Prichard, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
All right. So, rumor has it that you are a financial coach. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so tell me about that a little bit. What kind of a financial coach are you, and what areas of finance do you specialize in?
So just to give you a brief kind of description summary, I mean, a lot of people confuse me with an advisor, but the difference would be that they kind of help invest, whereas I help you budget to where you can start investing. You can be a little more intentional with your money. Kind of just show you the details of a budget, how to do those things, and how to communicate that with whether it is a spouse or an accountability partner that you may have, someone that you can meet with and kind of hold you accountable to that budget and that process that you're wanting to build, so that you can build your future for whether it's retirement or whatever kind of financial future you want to build.
Okay. And I know you specialize with finances with married couples. And I think that's a good thing, because we all know that finances is one of the things that come up as disputes very often in couples. And that those things, money issues, can destroy a union. And we want to try to avoid all of that if possible. Absolutely. So, finances. Let's talk generally about finances and budgeting a little bit there. So when you are married and you decide to take that plunge that binds you legally to your partner, and finances is one of those things. So what do you say to people who want to prepare for marriage financially? What would you say the agreement should be? Should they have a prenuptial? What should they talk about before getting involved?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just communicating about it and how they were raised around their finances, because that plays a big role in how they're going to do their own finances in the future. So if one spouse has, looked at money, was kind of raised as poor or middle class, and the other spouse was raised rich, they're going to have different views on money and different views on what a want versus a need is. And so you just want to start having those conversations and start, if you're not married yet and you're with a girlfriend or boyfriend, and or maybe you're engaged, then you want to start having those conversations like you were married. Like, what would we do in this situation? What would we do with our money in these situations as you're kind of getting ready to be married, so to speak? So you want to start having those conversations about, how do you budget? What is a budget? And have you been doing budgets, and so on and so forth. So I would recommend that I don't worry about a prenup, especially early on in the marriage. There's not a lot of reason for it. But if you were to do, what I do recommend is to combine all the finances once you're married and start having that conversation together, because the two of y'all, if you work together, you can do so much more than trying to do things separately with your separate incomes, and you're going to be pulling in different directions because you're trying to do two different things. So you want to communicate and try and do everything as one unit instead of trying to separate those two, and you're going to fight each other a lot of times when you're doing that.
So what happens when two people come from different financial philosophies? Like you gave the example of if someone's rich and someone's poor, or if someone is more extravagant, where they don't really have any constraints on spending. They buy whatever they want because they can. And another person could be a little bit more frugal, a little bit more freaking frugal. So what happens when those differences are there? How do you work those differences out?
Again, I think you have to, number one, assess where you're at. Assess like what your childhood or what your life was like as you were growing up, and what money looked like for you. Just defining what money is, and then as you talk about that with your spouse, you're able to kind of start to kind of shape a new, viewpoint of money. So now you've got these two maybe different viewpoints. One's poor, one's rich, or one's spender, one's a saver, and there's typically always that correlation. There's always a saver, and there's always a spender in the relationship, and so you've got to be able to merge those two and create a new, if you're working as one unit, now you have one viewpoint that's merged from those two other viewpoints, if that makes sense. So in some cases you may save, you may kind of lean on the saving side. In some cases you may lean on the spending side. But you've got to be able to talk through that and make sure you've got a foundation set around your finances, so that you're not, going overboard on the spending, or maybe you're not saving too much, because there can be, you've got 200 grand in the bank and it's not doing anything for you. That's maybe a little excessive. So let's take some of that and use it and actually make some money on it, or upgrading cars or upgrading whatever you've got. So you just got to be able to communicate that, but having that honest conversation and starting to say, okay, what do I really think about money, and actually giving your opinion out to your spouse, so that you can understand where they came from and how they look at it, what their perspective of money is. Being able to do that really shapes that new view that you can create as a whole, as a marriage unit. It's the same as parenting. You were parented by your parents as a kid. They were parented by their parents. Now you're trying to parent your own kids in a different fashion. So it's the same way of trying to merge those two conversations.
So when I think about marriage, I'm not married, and I don't know if I ever will be. But when I think about it, I think about myself, I wouldn't say that I was a saver. So. And I also like my own freedom. So I'm thinking if I'm married, I'm going to want my own spending money on the side, aside from the joint accounts. So what do you think about that? About couples who they have a joint account, but they also want their own private spending account as well? Is it good to have separate bank accounts?
I don't like separate bank accounts, but I do like the separate spending cash. But basically what we do is, in that budget of your total household income, is you set aside however much money you want to set aside for that personal spending money, where there's no question from the other spouse, like where did that go? What did you spend it on? You don't have to answer to what that money goes to. It's your spending money. And I think that is critical. You have to have some of that, whether, the amount can be discussed. And that's really where the communication comes into play, is the amount is discussed on how much you're given. And it depends on what your goals are. If your goals are trying to pay off debt, then maybe you cut back on that a little bit until you get things paid off. And then you can, ramp that back up and have some decent spending money. But I do think it's critical, but I don't like having separate bank accounts. It just opens the door for more issues down the road.
Yeah, I suppose it could. I definitely suppose it could. So just in general, what do you think are good general budgeting practices for a married couple? Putting aside the disputes or putting aside the differences in upbringing, what are some general budgeting tips that couples should keep in mind?
I think the couple big ones are, just understand that number one, you trust your spouse. Like you're married, so you trust them at some level, and you're coming together. So you want to come together in the finance area as well. And so being able to do that, I think, is a big step in the right direction. But then from a budgeting standpoint, we want you to budget month to month. So it's not just this arbitrary idea of a budget. You're trying to be specific. So we're going to tell you to do a zero-based budget, which means you're going to have your income at the top of the page, all of your expenses for that month, and which, so your income minus all your expenses equals zero. Some of your expenses can be savings, or can be, your personal spending cash, or whatever that may look like. But you just want to have a plan for that money that's coming in every single month. Otherwise, it gets lost in, your impulse spending, and you end up spending more than what you wanted to on certain areas. And then you're not saving for retirement. You're not saving for, other, maybe you do have kids and you got kids' college coming up. And so you're not able to save for some of these other situations. And then you get into where a lot of people are today, and they're trying to live on Social Security, and they're running out of money. So you got to be careful, and you want to be more intentional about it. And that's where, people think of a budget as a restraint. Well, it's more of a freedom. You get to choose what goes in that budget. You get to choose what your money does. And so you can have some freedom in there. You can create that freedom within your budget. But it's just that key to being specific every single month, because you have different expenses every month. You have, birthdays that come up, or different household expenses that you may need. So that you want to be on top of it every single month. And that's one of the biggest keys in budgeting.
Definitely. So what if you are planning to have some babies? What if you want to get together and merge and be fruitful and multiply? And so how do you prepare for that? You say, hey, honey, I want a little bun in the oven. And so we have to prepare for that budget-wise. How do you go about that, Mr. Zach?
Well, I think, number one, you don't want to wait till you're perfectly ready to have a baby. I think there's always something better you can do. But a good thing to have is just an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses in a savings account. That way, if something does happen, you can have, you can have some money set aside that you can cover medical expenses, or deposit, or a deductible if something arises at that point. You just want to start budgeting, monthly. When you do get pregnant, start budgeting monthly of what you want to spend on, baby stuff, new, cribs, or this or that or whatever. And so you kind of start having this fund that you're building. And so when you get closer, you can start to buy some of those items, and it's not such a burden as you get closer to the end. But again, you don't have to have the next best thing, and you don't have to have the biggest and newest, crib or bed, or, all of those different items. There's, I did it, young. So we found a lot of stuff on Facebook and Craigslist and stuff like that, we were able to get for a better price. And so I think it's just a matter of wherever you are, and don't be afraid to kind of jump into that without being so ready, because you'll never be as ready as you want to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I would assume you'd give similar advice if we have little babies or even older children and we're preparing for the whole college thing, helping our kids through college. So I guess you would advise some of the similar things, start getting prepared earlier on.
Absolutely. I think the best thing there would be to start your retirement first and foremost, because you're going to retire at some level. Your kids may or may not go to college in today's world. So first and foremost, start saving for college or saving for retirement. And then if you can, add a little bit to their college savings as they're growing up. If you start young and you start at 1 to 2 years old, you can put $170 a month in, and it should grow fairly close to what you need by the time they get to that age 18 and when they graduate and go to college. So, but if you don't get to start that low or start that young, then just pick the best college that's in state, that you can pay for in cash. Because debt is it's an enemy, and it will destroy you, because you'll get into that rhythm of trying to have debt and kind of keep on to that whole cycle, and it can hurt you in the long run.
Yeah, it certainly can. What have in your practices working with couples and finances and communication about finances, what do you find the 3 most common disputes or problems that come up in these situations?
I think one of the biggest ones is whether they want to combine their checking accounts or not. And I think there's that level of privacy, that level of pride that they want to have. Is like, this is mine and what I make. But there's that's the number one. But then just determining what a need versus a want is kind of a big item, I guess. And so, like, what denotes it, or what makes it a need versus a want. And so having that discussion is a whole nother idea, because you can want more clothes, but do you need that? Do you need a couple $100 worth of more clothes? And so it all depends on what goal you have as well. So, and then being able to align each other on those long-term goals, whether it's retirement or pre-retirement stage, where what are your goals are, what do you want to do with your money. And because a lot of times one spouse may want to travel a lot and the other spouse doesn't, so you have to try and figure out what's a medium goal in there that y'all can both shoot towards, and maybe you can do a little bit of traveling and then a little bit of whatever the other spouse wants to. So the goals are a big thing that spouses struggle to align themselves on, and sometimes they just kind of do their own separate things and expect that their relationship to be okay, and it kind of tears them down. Money is one of the number one cause of divorce, is money fights and money problems. So you want to be on the same page with it.
Now that's an interesting discussion. Now I didn't think about that. My head is not in the marriage space. So it's interesting you brought this up, and it reminded me, the needs versus wants. Because I'm a single dude, so I do whatever I want to do. But
Yeah.
and I'm thinking like, needs versus wants. Like I kind of know what it is, because obviously I don't want to spend myself into brokenness, so I have to budget myself. But now you were talking about me and another person's ideas of what a need and a want is. So how do you go about navigating that problem? I think something's a need, maybe she thinks it's a want, or vice versa. Or maybe I know that it's a want, that's why I want it, so I'm going to buy it. Like, how do you navigate through that?
Well, I think it starts with yourself. Or like, can you be honest with yourself and saying, okay, I have, X amount of clothes. Do I need, that much more? Or whether it's a toy or, something you really want, you got to get out of your childish thinking and saying, I don't like, because you can be an adult and say, I want it, so I'm going to go get it no matter what she says or no matter what they say. But that's a little bit childish. So you got to, if you want something, then plan for it. If you can't buy it right off the bat, or if you can, like, just have that conversation. Don't be afraid to have a conversation and say, this is why I want it. Because just because it's a want doesn't mean you can't buy it, as long as you have the money for it. Now, if you're trying to put it on credit cards or trying to put it on, finance it, then that's a whole nother discussion. Because that's, a lot of people will spend, that they'll put that, $50 stake on their credit card, and 3 months later they're paying $150 for it because of all the interest and stuff that's added up to it. So, but if you were to go to that restaurant and want to spend $150 on one steak, you would say no. But it's that matter of idea that it takes, months for it to get up to that point. So it's just a matter of trying to figure out, opportunity cost, and, deciding if it is a want, do we still want to buy it? I'm not saying you can't buy it. It's just a matter of having that discussion with your spouse to determine that, instead of trying to instead of being childish and say, I'm just going to go get it because I want it.
I'm going to get it because I said so. Yeah, but you have a wife. I don't care. But,
Absolutely.
Your finances are a little slow. Your kids are going to, I don't care. I want my steak. Yeah, that
Absolutely.
That does happen. That can happen. And I think one of the message here is, when you are in a relationship, it is about compromise and being flexible. When you're by yourself, you can kind of almost do what you want, as long as you're not homeless. Get yourself into a homeless situation. But if you're with somebody and you want to be there for the long haul, it's a good idea to get into the idea of flexibility and compromise.
Well, and that's the key, I think, is you don't want to sway one way or the other. Like, don't let one person always be the deciding factor. Like, have those conversations where everybody shares their opinion and their viewpoint on it, and then come to a new idea. So my communication side of it is trying to get you to say your opinion on it, get them to say their opinion, and then don't take one side or the other. Making a whole new view, like a whole new idea. So take a little bit from one side and a little bit from the other and create a whole new one, and that's what you go with. So you're creating a whole new you as a marriage unit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it is that, you're one person, your spouse is another, but then the relationship is a third entity. So
Absolutely.
That sounds like what you're getting at is that we're dealing with three different entities: me, my spouse, and the relationship.
Absolutely.
So we got to be mindful of that. So what got you into all this marriage finances? Because a lot of people are married, a lot of people are into finances and so forth, but not everyone makes it their career. So what got you into helping people with finances and communication over that?
So I started back in 2011. I started listening to Dave Ramsey. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of him. But I started listening to him, and it just got me really interested in finances, and I love numbers. So I was really interested in the number side of it. And once I got into it, I started really understanding, because I watched my parents struggle throughout throughout my childhood, living paycheck to paycheck, and just really struggling through that process. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I didn't want to be that parent when my kids are in high school. I didn't want to be struggling through it. So I knew that I had to figure out another way. So as I went through that with my process, my my journey, I started seeing that I could actually help other people open their eyes to, hey, there is a new way of doing this. And you don't have to live paycheck to paycheck. You don't have to have a car payment all the time. You don't have to just follow the normal society, and which is broke. But a lot of people are broke, and they're one paycheck away from disaster. And a lot of people found that out this year. But so that's what kind of sparked it in getting into it. And then I was working for a small company, and I really enjoyed the business side of things. And so I really, as I was working for them, I started helping my employees with their personal finances to help them stay focused at work. Because if they're not worried about paying their bills, then they're actually focused on what they're doing at work. And so as I did that more and more, I started really enjoying getting to help people. And so once I left that job, I just dove right into the financial coaching aspect, and it's been a really awesome journey ever since. So.
Excellent. That is excellent to hear. What is one piece of advice you would give to any married couple about anything around finances?
I think the biggest thing is, I say it all the time, is don't hesitate to communicate. So just say what you think and be honest with them, because you're at some level, you got into the marriage because you like them, you trust them. So be honest with them so that you can move forward or move past whatever, issue you're facing. So what a lot of people do is they don't want to say what they're thinking because they fear what the other person's going to think, or they fear that they're going to get mad. And so, but understand, and you may come out and say, okay, I'm not sure how you're going to take this, but this is my opinion. This is the way I feel. Let's have a conversation about this, and don't get so personal. Don't feel so personally attacked in those conversations. Just let the conversation go.
Cool. All right. So how can people get in touch with you about these marriage finances before they get married or before they beat each other up? How could they reach out to you to help them not beat each other up over money?
Absolutely. So my website is aafinancialcoaching.com. And so there's a free course on there that they can do just to get started with the budgeting and communication aspect. So it's just a 7 lessons or quick 5-minute videos that you can kind of go through just to get you started. If you've never been budgeting, it'll help you get things rolling. So, and if nothing else, just schedule a consult with me. They're all free. So I'll do the first session free with you guys, and we'll help get that communication rolling in that process.
Oh, excellent. So yeah, turn to Zach if you you need to not beat up your wife or husband for buying that car behind your back. You bought a car without telling me? People do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that commercial where they always come home with the brand new car and the keys in the driveway, and it's like, who does that? Why would you buy that something that major without telling your spouse? And so it's a big communication breakdown. But even though it's a nice car, they look at it like almost a backstabbing type of thing sometimes.
Yeah, it's finances will get anybody into money. People will fight and kill and do whatever over money. So
absolutely,
it is the way it is. All right. Well, thanks for coming on the program, Zach, and giving us this information about how to stay sane and homicide free when dealing with finances with your spouse.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
If you'd like to be a guest on the Core Confidence Life podcast, just fill out our application by going to coreconfidencelife.com/guest. That's coreconfidencelife.com/guest. We appreciate you and all your feedback. So to give us comments about the podcast or anything else, just send a message to Dennis at coreconfidencelife.com. That's Dennis at coreconfidencelife.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and all the social media outlets, of course, at Core Confidence Life. I'm your host, Dennis, from New York City, giving you higher consciousness, lower stress, hard-hitting manhood issues with just a side of cornball humor.